Hello, I'm R.A. Spratt, and I want to welcome people joining us this week on the Yoto podcast platform. Now, just so you know, most of the bedtime stories I tell here are standalone stories. But over the last year, we have been dipping in and out of the epic story of Odysseus, the hero from ancient Greek mythology. And this week, I'm going to be telling the second last installment of that tale. So if you can jump in right here, that'll be fine. I'm sure you'll pick it all up. But if you did want to go back to the beginning and start from the first episode, you can search back through the episodes. The first episode's called Odysseus, as told by Nanny Piggins, and it dropped on January 8th, 2025. Or you can go back and listen to any of the other episodes. You're going to find fairy tales, myths, legends, and mysteries. I hope you enjoy them all. Now let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Bedtime Stories with me, R.A. Spratt. Well, as this episode drops, I'm going to be in Sweden, so I'm recording this in advance, and this is the second half of the story I began last week, Nanny Piggins and the Ominous Sounds. Okay, so I'll go back a little bit and pick it up so that you can run in with a sense of the story. Okay, so Nanny Piggins, just to summarise, she'd sprained her ankle when she tried to burst into the sweet shop just as they were lowering the door. So she's sitting up in her room watching the street with her binoculars and telescope. But she's just got in trouble for telling Mrs. Lau there was a burglar in her house, and Mrs. Lau hit the burglar over the head with a frying pan, but it was actually Mrs. Lau's husband. So the police sergeant has told her off. So we'll pick up the story there. So the police sergeant gave Nanny Piggins a lecture about wasting police time and instigating violence. Nanny Piggins was, however, not deterred. In fact, it encouraged her. Girl detectives were always told off for wasting police time right before they uncovered the international ring of wicked thieves. So as soon as the police sergeant got back in his patrol car and drove off to the donut shop, even being around Nanny Piggins made people want sugary food, she went back to work on the lookout for crime. Now, you have to understand, Mr. Green had not chosen to live on this street because it was a high-crime area. Most of the residents were every bit as boring as him. So even though she had a vivid imagination and a 20 by 30 power telescope, Nanny Piggins still struggled to find a crime over the next few hours. She did consider ringing the newspaper to report an outbreak of plague when she saw a rat gnawing at one of Mr. Peterson's garbage bags. And Nanny Piggins consulted Mr. Green's law books, the one he forced her to get back from the bookstall, to see if she could have Mrs. Merkel arrested for crimes against food when she saw what her neighbour was cooking for her husband's dinner. But it turns out you can't have someone arrested for bad cooking unless that cooking is so bad it causes injury. So Nanny Piggins would just have to wait until Mr. Merkel got food poisoning the next day. But then, just after lunch, a family-sized coffee cake and a dozen chocolate bars, Nanny Piggins saw a major crime in progress. She saw Mr. Henderson chasing his wife around the kitchen, hitting her on the back. Nanny Piggins immediately called the police. She was actually on the line to them when she saw Mr. Henderson grab his wife and shake her. Nanny Piggins was so outraged that, despite her doctor's orders, she got up, hopped over to her dressing table, picked up her blowgun, hopped back to the window and shot Mr. Henderson in the neck with a paralysing dart, given to her years earlier by a generous South American pygmy who was impressed by her circus performance. The police arrived moments later. The donut shop was only just around the corner, so the police sergeant had not gone far, only to find a distraught Mrs. Henderson wanting to prosecute Nanny Piggins for killing her husband. As Nanny Piggins was to say later in her official police statement, "How was I to know that Mrs. Henderson was choking on a hazelnut and that Mr. Henderson was simply trying to administer the Heimlich manoeuvre?" Once Nanny Piggins had assured Mrs. Henderson that her husband was not dead, he would just be asleep for 4 or 5 days, the police sergeant banned Nanny Piggins from reporting any more crime for the rest of the day. He even took away her girl detective novels and gave her a boring police manual titled How to Be a Good Citizen to read instead. Nanny Piggins was very glum as she sat in the big, empty house. She still had 2 hours until the children came home from school, and goodness knows how long until Boris came home from teaching the bank tellers to dance. He'd not returned home until 3 a.m. the previous day because the tellers had such bad attitudes. They kept trying to charge him a transaction fee every time he spoke to them. So Nanny Piggins was sitting there, eating chocolate and feeling very sorry for herself, when she heard the front door slam downstairs. "That's odd," thought Nanny Piggins. Then she heard a muffled voice, and suddenly the distinct sound of Mr. Green yelling, "That won't do! That just won't do! I won't stand for it! Do you hear me?" Nanny Piggins was intrigued. It was unusual for Mr. Green to be home in the middle of the day, and it was unusual for him to be so assertive. Who could he be yelling at? But just then her thoughts were interrupted by a blood-curdling feminine scream. "Ah!" Nanny Piggins leapt to her feet. Then the shooting pain in her ankle reminded her that she could not stand, and she fell back down. "Take that, and that, and that!" yelled Mr. Green, his words punctuated by dull thuds. When the yelling and thudding eventually stopped, Nanny Piggins could hear the sound of Mr. Green breathing heavily. He was not a man who took exercise, because he was rightly embarrassed by his appearance in shorts. "Oh no! What have I done?" wailed Mr. Green. "What am I going to do?" Next, Nanny Piggins heard the sound of something being moved about. A few thuds, a whack, a bang, something heavy being dragged along the floor, and then the sound of the front door opening. Nanny Piggins hobbled to the window, where she saw Mr. Green drag the rolled-up living room rug over to his Rolls-Royce and, with some effort, lift it into the boot of his car. "Mr. Green's killed someone!" exclaimed Nanny Piggins. Unfortunately, she'd used her last paralysing dart on Mr. Henderson only that morning, so she had no way of stopping him from getting away. What was she to do? What would Tracy McWeldon, girl detective, do? When Derek, Samantha and Michael returned home from school, they were surprised to discover Nanny Piggins downstairs, sitting in the living room, wearing a smoking jacket and a deerstalker hat. "Are you all right, Nanny Piggins?" asked Derek. "Is there any particular reason you dressed up as Sherlock Holmes?" "Oh, I've never been better," said Nanny Piggins cryptically. "But someone among us has been a victim of a foul crime." Crash! Boris burst in through the back door, slammed through the kitchen and into the living room. "What's going on?" he demanded. "I got a message down at the dance studio saying that a tanker full of honey had smashed into the house." "You will have to forgive me. That was merely a pretext to separate you from your students," said Nanny Piggins. "Nanny Piggins, are we going to have to ban you from reading detective novels?" asked Michael sternly. Just then they heard the wail of a police siren and then the screech of tyres as the police sergeant pulled up and leapt out of his car. "Oh no," said Samantha. "You aren't going to be arrested, are you?" "Don't worry. If you are, we'll come down to the prison and smuggle in cakes hidden inside cakes," promised Derek. The police sergeant, followed by a young constable, rushed up the Greens' front steps and let himself in. "This had better be good, Nanny Piggins," said the police sergeant, "or I'm arresting you for wasting police time." "Ha!" laughed Nanny Piggins. "You'll be pinning a medal on me for doing your job in a minute. Just you wait and see." "Constable, make a note," grumbled the police sergeant. "This afternoon we must talk to the man at the bookshop about not selling detective novels to anyone who lives in this house." "When all of you have gathered around, I shall reveal the perpetrator," said Nanny Piggins, twirling an imaginary moustache. "Perhaps we should call a doctor," suggested Samantha. "Nanny Piggins is on pain medication for her ankle. They may need to lower the dose." But before they could ring the hospital, someone else burst in through the front door. It was Mr. Green. Boris immediately put a lampshade on his head to hide. "Where do I sign? Where do I sign?" yelled Mr. Green. "Ah, good, we're all here," said Nanny Piggins. "Derek, bar the doors." "What's going on?" demanded Mr. Green. "I got a message saying my children had been accepted into a wilderness survival television show, and if I rushed home to sign the permission slips, I wouldn't see them for 8 months. "That was merely my cunning ruse to lure you into my trap," announced Nanny Piggins. "Oh, no. Nanny Piggins, you're not going to be arrested and fired, are you?" said Michael resignedly. "Au contraire, there is a wicked murderer among us, and it is he who shall be arrested and lose his job," declared Nanny Piggins. "If you don't explain what you're talking about this second, I am going to get very cross," said the police sergeant. "All right, I will begin. I have gathered you all here because at 1:57 p.m. this afternoon, I heard Mr. Green murder a woman with the carpet sweeper in this very room," announced Nanny Piggins. Mr. Green sat down and dabbed his forehead. He was not accused of murder every day, at least not on any day in the last 2.5 years since his wife died. On that occasion, he did have to answer some very sticky questions about how Mrs. Green managed to go missing on a crowded boat under such mysterious circumstances. "I did no such thing," he whimpered. "Ha!" accused Nanny Piggins. "That's the excuse all murderers use." The police sergeant nodded. She was quite right. "Do you have any evidence?" asked Derek. Derek was not as fond of his father as a son usually is, but that did not mean he wanted his father to rot in jail. Also, having lived in the same house as his father for 11 years, Derek seriously doubted that Mr. Green was capable of doing anything as interesting as committing murder. "I heard it with my own ears," explained Nanny Piggins. "At 1:56 p.m, I was sitting quietly in my room on the lookout for criminal activity in the street when I distinctly heard Mr. Green come home, yell at someone, then beat them repeatedly with a blunt instrument." Everyone turned to look at Mr. Green. He whimpered again. "Oh, there's no proof." "Ah, that is where you're wrong. You will note," said Nanny Piggins, whipping a telescopic pointer out of her sleeve. Her years in the circus had taught her to have props at the ready, "that the red armchair is not where it usually is." "Gosh, she's right," said Samantha. "The red armchair isn't usually jammed up against the television screen. It's usually on the other side of the room by the window." "Derek, if you move the chair to one side, we will be able to observe more physical evidence," said Nanny Piggins. Derek moved the chair, and there, in the floorboards, were several deep, nasty dents. Everyone gasped. "Oh!" said the police sergeant. "It's going to be a devil of a job to get them out with a disc sander," said the police constable knowledgeably. He was very fond of doing woodwork in his spare time. "And Samantha, if you reach under the sofa, you will find another item of interest. Make sure you use your handkerchief to pick it up. You don't want to smudge the fingerprints," instructed Nanny Piggins. Samantha reached under the sofa and pulled out a very battered carpet sweeper. Again, everyone gasped. "That's going to be no good for cleaning floors anymore," said Boris, even though he was still hidden under the lampshade. "And finally, I draw your attention to the spot on the floor where the police sergeant is standing," said Nanny Piggins. "What do you see?" "Nothing," said the police sergeant, looking at the floor beneath his feet. "Exactly," said Nanny Piggins triumphantly. "Where is the brand new hearthrug?" Everyone gasped for a third time. "She's right. Father brought home a new hearthrug last week, and now it's missing," exclaimed Michael. "That is because he," Nanny Piggins pointed her trotter dramatically at Mr. Green, "used it to roll up his victim and drag her to his car." "Constable, you'd better get out your handcuffs," said the police sergeant. Mr. Green leapt to his feet. "I can explain," he wailed. The constable crash-tackled him to the ground. "What are you doing, constable?" asked the police sergeant. "I thought he was trying to escape," explained the police constable. "You were just trying to get in some rugby practice, weren't you?" chided the police sergeant. "All right, sir. If you can explain this damning litany of evidence against you, then we better have it." "I didn't murder anyone, I swear. I did put the dents in the floorboard, but only because I saw a cockroach, and I used the carpet sweeper to kill it," said Mr. Green. "Piffle," said Nanny Piggins. "Look at all the marks on the floor. Why would you beat a cockroach so many times?" "Because I kept missing," admitted Mr. Green. "Oh," said Nanny Piggins. This actually made sense. They all knew Mr. Green had terrible hand-eye coordination. "But how do you explain the missing carpet? Why would you roll up the carpet and put it in your boot if there wasn't a dead body inside?" "Because there was a dead cockroach squashed into the fibres, so I took it straight to the carpet store to get it cleaned," shuddered Mr. Green. "Oh, it was yucky." "Oh," said Nanny Piggins. "But how do you explain the yelling and the high-pitched feminine scream?" "That was me," said Mr. Green. "I was yelling at my secretary on the telephone. She was trying to reschedule my haircut appointment from 2 p.m. to 2:15 p.m, and I wouldn't stand for it. I don't see why I should have to rearrange my day just because my hairdresser has to go to a funeral." "But, sir, the high-pitched feminine scream?" asked the police sergeant. "I don't know what you're talking about. The pig must have been hearing things," said Mr. Green shiftily. "Sir," reproached the police sergeant. "Oh, all right," burst out Mr. Green. "I admit it. The cockroach ran up my leg and I panicked. I took my trousers off, but at that very moment a woman collecting for the Salvation Army came to the door, and when she saw me through the window in my underwear, she screamed." "Ha! Preposterous! You'll never be able to prove that," scoffed Nanny Piggins. "Well, actually I can," said Mr. Green sheepishly, as he opened a drawer in the sideboard and took out a Salvation Army collection tin. "She dropped this as she ran away." "You were going to hand that in, weren't you, sir?" said the police sergeant sternly. "Oh, yes," lied Mr. Green. And so, while the abandoned collection tin proved that Mr. Green was morally bankrupt, it also proved that he was innocent of the charge of murder. "Oh dear," said the police sergeant. "I'm sorry, Nanny Piggins. I think I really will have to arrest you for wasting police time this time." But just then the doorbell rang and the man from the carpet shop came in. "We got all the cockroach goo out of your carpet, Mr. Green," he said as he unrolled the rug on the floor. Now it was the police sergeant and the constable's turn to gasp. "Get out your handcuffs, constable. It looks like we're going to arrest you, Mr. Green, after all," announced the police sergeant. "What? What for?" asked Mr. Green, desperately trying to guess which one of the many not quite legal things he did in his daily life as a tax lawyer that the police sergeant might be arresting him for. "That is the famous great Luxor carpet from the Highcrest mansion that was stolen last week. So either you are a cat burglar or you have received stolen property," accused the police sergeant. "It was a gift from a client," protested Mr. Green. "Why would a client give you one of the most valuable handmade Persian rugs in the entire world?" asked the police sergeant. "He was a friend," suggested Mr. Green. "Sir," chided the police sergeant. "It was a reward for helping him set up an offshore truffle trading scheme for funneling money out of the country," blurted Mr. Green. "Which technically is not in any way illegal. I know because I had my clerk triple-check the law books." "Constable, get out your notepad." "OK, Mr. Green, tell us. Which client? What was his name?" ordered the police sergeant. Mr. Green gulped, but he did as he was told. Much as he hated losing a client to the prison system, he much preferred that to having to spend time in the prison system himself. And so, just as she had predicted, Nanny Piggins managed to use her recuperation time to foil a gang of wicked international thieves. Which just goes to show, if you set yourself goals, you can achieve anything. But Boris and the children were relieved a few days later when Nanny Piggins was able to start walking again, so she could return her energy to being the world's most glamorous flying pig/nanny and leave the girl detective work to the likes of Tracy McWeldon. All right, well, there you go. Well, that's the third Nanny Piggins book. So I wrote that many years ago, it would be like 16, 17 years ago, like 4 or 5 years before I started writing Friday Barnes. So it just goes to show I was thinking about girl detective books, even all those years before I started writing Friday Barnes. It probably went some way to inspiring the Friday Barnes series when I wrapped up Nanny Piggins, that story. So it's nice to revisit that and see where all those ideas came from. All right, well, we'll leave it there. Next week I will be back home, although I may be really jet lagged, but hopefully I'll have time to write a fresh story for you next week. Maybe I'll write you something a story that I've heard while I was in Sweden. We'll see. Okay, well, that's it for now. Until next time, goodbye. Hello, it's me again. If you enjoyed listening to Bedtime Stories with R.A. Spratt, it would be really helpful if you could like, subscribe, follow, and or review the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to now. Every little one of those digital affirmations helps, and the bigger this podcast gets, the more I can justify procrastinating from my real job to keep bringing these stories to you. Thank you.